Hi everybody and welcome to Only Daken. In this series, we will be taking the newest Marvel Snap Season Pass card and trying to climb the ranks and hit infinite by only utilizing strategies that involve Daken. There's an old saying that goes, it's not about the size of your Daken, but how you use it. But in this case, he's gonna get huge. Daken is 3 energy and 4 power, and it reads, on reveal, add the Muramasa shard to your hand. Now, the Muramasa shard is 1 energy and 1 power, and it reads, when this card is discarded or destroyed, double Daken's power. So right away, we can tell that the decks that we want to be building around Daken are going to be involving us destroying our cards or discarding them. Now, the first deck that comes to mind for this strategy is Sandman Ramp. I'm kidding. Why would that ever... That doesn't even go together. Or maybe. So to begin this challenge, we first have to get Daken, and luckily with a simple click and $14 later, we have secured our copy. So I mentioned that Daken works extremely well in destroy decks and discard decks. However, the deck I want to try him out with is Danken Surfer. I have reached infinite the last 2 seasons with the exact same build of Silver Surfer. The Surfer deck is a great modular shell that adapts well to any meta. You're seeing lots of bounce, just simply swap out your Nova for a Ghost to ensure you don't have priority on turn 6. Keep losing to lane control? No problem, just play a Goose to prevent the Professor X. Have trouble beating super tall decks? Well, too bad, get Surfer decks have always had a hard time dealing with tall decks because they can't go tall themselves. Sure, you can have a few games where you reach 30 or so power, but overall, you'll be hovering around the low 20s, and that's for your best lane. The other lane is a Storm. So when I saw a card like Daken coming out, I knew that this would fix the issue of Surfer not being able to compete with the big boys and girls. Before we begin, I just wanted to give a big thank you to all the new subscribers. I did not think my last video would do so well, so thank you. So this is the shell that I have been running for the past 2 seasons to get my infinite. This deck was great against bounce, so it used cards like Ghost so that we don't have priority on turn 6. And then of course we played tech cards like Rogue. Rogue can steal your opponent's ongoing effects. Shadow King again was amazing against bounce. Killmonger again, bounce. You see the trend here, bounce. Bounce was basically the deck to beat for the past 2 seasons, and this is exactly how I built my Silver Surfer list. Now going into this brand new season, bounce got nerfed. I'm not exactly sure that we're going to be seeing so much bounce, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to be taking out this Ghost. I'm also going to be dropping the Luke Cage. I love you, but maybe not this season. And I think I'm probably going to be cutting the Shadow King. Now, I do love Shadow King, and we might put him back into the deck later. But again, like I said, if we're not seeing too much bounce, it's not too useful to us. But also, we need to be putting in the Daken into the deck. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my Daken into the deck. Welcome. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to add a 1-drop that's going to work well with Daken. I think for this, I'm going to be trying to go with Nova. I figure that if I boost my Daken with Nova before we destroy the Muramasa shard, he's going to be doubling his power there. And the other card we're going to try out is actually Forge. Now, Forge, similar to Nova, is going to be boosting our Daken. With our deck set, the theory is that on turn 3, we will be playing our Daken, adding the Muramasa shard to our hand. On turn 4, we will be playing a random 3-drop along with the Muramasa shard. On turn 5, we do some stuff. Usually, we'd like to be dropping a Sarah on this turn. And on turn 6, we finish off with a Killmonger, followed by a Silver Surfer. Now, this will ensure that our Daken will have 10 power, which is pretty good for a 3-drop. However, we can even take the strategy even further by playing a Forge on turn 2, making our Daken 14 on turn 6. Before we even think about jumping into the ladder, we do have to give this deck a proper name, Danken Surfer. Now, remember the strategy I talked about just 30 seconds ago? Yeah, well, our first game was exactly that. Turn 3, our Daken got boosted by Forge and added a Muramasa shard to our hand. Turn 4, we play Polaris and a Muramasa shard. Turn 5, we rip the Sarah and slam it down. And turn 6, our Killmonger and Surfer go to town, making our Daken 14. This game could not have been better scripted, and we are off to a good start with 4 cubes. Now, I wish I could say the same about the next set of games, however, I would be lying. In fact, while our first game was great, the next few were very middling. We took a couple of wins, but we also lost big. And it was those tall decks that gave us a hard time. So with that being said, I think it's time for some deck adjustments to shore out our weaknesses. Okay, so I've played a few games with the deck now. Some of the cards I don't like are Forge. In theory, Forge was great to boost the Daken. I find that a lot of times when I played Forge, I almost would have rather had like a Goose in that spot. I'm gonna add back Goose. Nova, I'm still kind of uncertain about. I'm not sure that I am crazy about Nova, but I also don't feel like Nova was terrible. I do see a lot of Darkhawk decks, so I think Rogue is pretty good. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut Polaris, I'm going to put in Shadow King and see how that goes. Polaris is one of my favorite cards, but if it's not working, then it's not working. But for now, I'm going to put in a Shadow King. We played a few more games, and even with the changes, the deck just felt lacking. I just said that if a card is not working, then it's not working, and it's important to recognize that. But what's even more important to recognize is when a deck is not working. In theory, Daken seemed like he would be a good fit in a Surfer list. I did find that boosting the Daken often made for awkward plays. Games where I did not drop the Muramasa Shard on turn 4, it just felt bad to play it on any other turn. And sometimes, when we don't play a Sarah on turn 5, Killmonger might not even be the right play on 6, especially if all we're doing is destroying the Shard. Now, while I was a bit upset with the deck's performance, I at least unlocked the season rewards and took some time to open up one of my mystery variants. And it was at that time that I was graced by an angel. And by angel, I mean cow. And not from heaven, from hell. I opened up this beautiful pixel variant of Hellcow, and I took that as a sign. So remember when I said in the beginning of the video that Daken would work well in discard strategies? Well, that's exactly what we did. I decided to pivot my deck to a discard Daken deck, formerly dubbed Disco Deck. So this is the discard deck that we are going to be pivoting to. We're trying to get a nice curve here, so we do have the Nebula. We're going to be dropping Nebula on the right lane, and Nebula's just going to be sitting there and hopefully gaining power. We have the Morbius, obviously because we're discarding cards from our hand, so Morbius is going to be getting huge. I will say Daken does a pretty good job at boosting the Morbius as well. Normally on turn 3, if we play a card, it doesn't add a card back to our hand, but because Daken adds the Muramasa Shard, that's just going to be making our Morbius 2 power greater. Wolverine, obviously we want to discard that with our M.O.D.O.K. Ideally with Swarm, you want to hit him with a Colleen Wing early on. That way if M.O.D.O.K discards it, we're going to be playing 4 free Swarms at the end of our turn. That gives us about a 12 power swing. Dracula is extremely scary, especially if he's discarding Apocalypse at the end of the game. Hellcow is essentially another enabler on turn 5. If we don't draw M.O.D.O.K, then we're going to be playing a Hellcow on turn 5. Now, obviously, if we draw a M.O.D.O.K on turn 5, we're pretty much winning the game just because of how much value M.O.D.O.K is going to be generating for us. And America Chavez is obviously here to increase our odds of drawing better cards early on, but also, worst case, we can also drop an America Chavez with some Swarms and then have our Dracula discard our Apocalypse. Now, Daken is great in this deck because we're going to be playing him in a Morbius lane. That way, if our opponent hits us with an Enchantress, Daken is still going to be 8 power by the end of the game, and our opponent will need to play more cards into that lane to win instead of just dropping the Enchantress. So with the deck set, we go ahead and we play our first game. We start with the Project Pegasus, which allows us to play Dracula on turn 1. Turn 2, we play Colleen Wing into Aunt May, which will not only give her 3 extra power, but with Colleen's effect, we now have 2 Swarms in our hand. Turn 3, we play the Morbius and clone it. Now, since it's already turn 4 and I did not see a M.O.D.O.K yet, I opt to play my Hellcow into the cloning vat to hit a few cards in my hand. This will then allow me to play Hellcow on turn 5 as well, in case we do not hit the M.O.D.O.K. I opt to play my Swarms with the Hellcow on turn 5 to increase the odds of hitting our Apocalypse in hand. Now, unfortunately, we whiff, but that's fine since we hit the Wolverine. This then allows us to play Chavez on 6 and have the Dracula discard the Apocalypse. And our opponent just retreats. Now, while we didn't even play a Daken this game or even draw our M.O.D.O.K, I will say we managed to string together a pretty good win. And this allowed us to get back some much needed cubes that we've lost by playing the Surfer deck. So I put together a few more wins, and now I'm tired and I'm gonna go play on the couch on my phone. So while I record on my computer for content, I do actually prefer to play Marvel Snap on my phone. And I do so on my couch and, well, in other areas. And just like that, while I don't have footage of gameplay for you because I was playing on my phone, we did manage to breeze through the ranks of the 70s and well into the 80s. So here I am at rank 88. The discard deck has been forming extremely well. Daken has been phenomenal in this deck. And I wasn't planning to do this, but I think I'm actually going to go ahead and grind out the rest of my run to infinite tonight. And that's exactly what I did. Here's a game where we open up Morbius on turn 2. We play Lady Sif into Asgard, discarding the Apocalypse turn 4. We play Dracula followed by M.O.D.O.K on 5. M.O.D.O.K discards our whole hand and gives us 2 Swarms for turn 6. Turn 6, I play the Chavez, and Dracula discards Apocalypse for game. 35 and 32. Now those are some tall lanes. I'm going to show you a couple of games, but more importantly, I want to focus on some of the things I learned about the deck. The most important part is that we want to use Colleen Wing to always hit a Swarm. Hitting a Shard just doesn't feel as good since M.O.D.O.K will always hit the Shard on 5 anyway. So if we have to skip our curve to play a Colleen on 3 and Daken on 4, that's perfectly okay to do. As I mentioned before, the games where we had Swarm to drop on turn 6 were some of our most successful. The other thing I learned about this deck is that you want to snap early and you want to snap aggressively. If you see a M.O.D.O.K or an Apocalypse in your hand, those are games I definitely want to be snapping. Now, the video is about Daken, and I have to say he was definitely the MVP of this deck. I always tried to drop him with a Morbius so that an Enchantress counterplay didn't impact me as much. The other thing that's great about Daken is he is not vulnerable to Shang-Chi. I always tried to drop my Daken on locations where he wouldn't get boosted to avoid the Shang-Chi counter. In general, this deck plays really well around the Shang-Chi. Now, while Hellcow did not see as much play as M.O.D.O.K, there were times where he came in clutch to help us in games where we otherwise would not have been in. If I had to guess, I would say our win rate was well over 70%, and it felt like we were almost in all of our games. Overall, it did well against the playing field of decks like Zabu Good Stuff, Thanos, and even some Bounce. As you'll see, here we play a Colleen hitting the Wolverine. While we wanted to hit the Swarm, this isn't the end of the world. I play a Sif on 3 to boost the Apocalypse, and on turn 4, we drop our Dracula. Turn 5, we were committed to the right lane, so we played our Hellcow. Now, hoping to hit a M.O.D.O.K on 6 with the Quantum Tunnel, we were lucky enough to hit the Swarm with the Hellcow, and this will give us 2 tries. With RNG in our favor, we were lucky enough to hit M.O.D.O.K on the 50-50, and just like that, we secure our Infinite. Now, I think it's fitting that the final booster that we got was Daken. Overall, I would say the climb took me about 4 to 5 hours overall in gameplay. I didn't actually expect to hit Infinite so fast. In fact, this is the fastest I've ever hit Infinite. Daken is a super fun card, and I'm definitely looking forward to doing a challenge like this in the future. Thank you guys again so much for watching. If you stuck all the way to the end, you guys are the real MVP. And I'll see you guys in the next video.